Okay, so Joe, the past two episodes, we've kind of introduced the topic of the life first business. And as a part of that, we talked about the ownership trap, which we've kind of defined as like the phenomenon where solopreneurs unknowingly build businesses that dominate their time and energy, and then they become slaves to their business, kind of like a traditional job. um, and we say that a lot of that is the lack of design, and they build a business around their skills. And I started thinking about it in the context of scheduling and time because so many solopreneurs bring their habits from corporate into their solopreneur business, even if they don't intend to. Like you'll have people who adopt somebody else's productivity framework without questioning it because that's what they did in their career their whole life before going solo. They're used to time blocking, morning routines, the Pomodoro technique. I've talked about that.
All good
And these
stuff.
are all
All good stuff. Yeah.
all good stuff, but they're all organized around the clock and not around you, right? And I feel like that's a trap in itself. You're optimizing a schedule instead of really optimizing your output. And the calendar kind of becomes your boss, which is the opposite of why you left your job, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think using a calendar as a to-do list is a bad idea. I've talked about that before. And I think I first heard that from David Allen, who did Getting Things Done. There's a lot of reasons for that, and I won't go into all of them. But, I think what you're getting at here is the fact that, just using your calendar to say, oh, there's time here, I can do this thing needs to get done, is something that we probably, if we step back and thought about it, say it's probably not a perfect strategy. But, we don't step back and think about it. We just go, okay, yeah, I got an opening for, at 3 p.m. I can do that. Yeah, it's open.
Yeah, exactly. And I would argue that now that you have your own business, instead of planning around a calendar, plan around the times of day where your energy is highest and then revolve your work and your meetings and everything around that. And I know it's not groundbreaking. Everybody knows when their energy is highest, right? um, but they just aren't revolving their businesses around it intentionally. They treat their energy patterns kind of as trivia, like, oh, I'm a morning person. Oh, I'm a night owl. I get up at 5:30 naturally. And they use it as that as opposed to treating it, I would say, like operational data. Do you feel like that's fair to say?
Well, I absolutely do. And I think, and again, going back to David Allen, it's something he talks about extensively. In fact, in his system, you indicate for a given task, you indicate exactly what kind of energy level is required. Do I need, high energy, real focus, or is this a kind of a menial thing that I can do in my sleep? That's the kind of stuff I like to do at 3 p.m. Although if it's really boring, I'll actually fall asleep because I am
Yes.
not an afternoon person. I'm great in the mornings and in the early afternoon, but later afternoon, I don't come back to life till around 5 p.m. It's just a lull, and I know it, and I try really hard now to avoid important stuff at those times. Can't always do it, but I try really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought, and I talked to you about this yesterday, where I think like our soundbite episodes, we should start pushing them into like actionable things people can start doing because we have our interview episodes, they're longer, but I'm like, what kind of advice can we give people today that they can start implementing today? So um, I'm throwing this advice out there blindly because I haven't told you about this yet. But I did come up with some ideas I have to start building your business around your most energetic times instead of your time to help a person get closer to a life first business. And I put together like 3 quick steps just to kind of get people heading in the right direction. So, again, I know you've never heard these steps. So feel free to throw a curveball and be like,
All
"Bleh,
right, I will.
that sounds ridiculous. You're the peanut gallery. You're the one that
Yes.
brings me back down to reality." So identify your high energy windows. And again, I know people know when their high energy windows are, but this is like a practical, like for real, identify this. So I would recommend tracking your energy for 1 full week. I know people are like, I don't like doing food diaries and I don't like doing this. Just 1 week and track your energy and not your schedule. And then rate yourself if you're feeling sharp, steady, or dragging. Joe, you know the 3 to 5 window, that's your time. But are there other times of the day that you may not be noticing that you're dragging? And then don't judge it or try to fix it. Just observe and write it down. So you're trying to find patterns. And in my opinion, or at least for me, because I actually did this a few weeks ago, I had like 2 or 3 peak windows per day. And honestly, they were a little shorter than I thought, but man, was I productive during those 2 to 3 peak windows, like could crank it out so fast. And then just be honest with yourself during this step 1 of identifying your high energy windows, and don't try to change who you are, but just observe. Are you good with that first step?
I am. I would like to clarify that it's important, I think, to do this over multiple days, because sometimes certain tasks energize you more than others. And that pattern, if you just try to do it one day, might be misleading based on the fact you were doing something really interesting at some time of day versus less so. So it would be good to have a little more data than just a short
Oh,
short
and that's
window.
why I say a week.
Yeah.
Like at least a week.
Yeah.
I mean, even, I don't know if I told you this, I went to the Avalanche Wild hockey playoff game on Sunday night, and it was insane. And we got home around midnight. I don't stay up past 8:30. So this is like crazy, but it was a big thing for my husband. And the day after, like, nothing, I'd have energy for any time of day. So that's another reason why you shouldn't just do a one-off day, because you're, depending on your sleep habits, whatever, dog wakes you up, like you need a good sample size. And maybe that's not even a week, maybe that's 2 weeks, but you need to start noticing these patterns, I guess is what I'd say. Um, okay, so you have the patterns, and then let's go with David Allen and match your high energy windows to the high value work. So first you need to define what that high value work actually means in your business. That's like the tasks that directly generate revenue, build relationships, move the strategy forward. This isn't emails. This isn't checking a to-do list. This is actual like brain intensive work that your business would need to like to survive. And most people spend their peak energy on things like email and Joe's favorite thing, Slack, and
My favorite.
admin
Yeah.
work, your favorite, or lack thereof, because that's what's sitting in front of them, and you feel like you're being productive, but you're not. That's just the busy work. So then once you know where your high value work is, then you can fill in the gaps with the low energy time after you've allocated where you're doing your high value work based off of your high energy levels. But if you're a morning person and you immediately start firing from the get-go, don't look at your email. Start thinking of your strategy for the next 3 months. Start sending out if you are going to do email, start reaching out to people to set up a cup of coffee or a meeting or something, but do something that's actually productive. And again, at this point, you should know how long your peak windows are. So if it's 2 hours, protect those 2 hours like they're a meeting with your biggest client and just go to town for those 2 hours. And then if you're going to hit a slump, maybe that's when you go work out to get out of the slump. But just map the high energy windows with your high value work.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, especially not checking the email, because it automatically leads you down some rabbit hole, right? You're going to see some email that needs a response, and then you're going to, and then the next thing your window's gone. I disagree with the idea of doing email, reaching out via email to create relationships, because I don't think that's I think it's a high value thing, but I don't think it requires that high energy. If you have a certain, way that you phrase things when you do these reach outs, it can almost, and don't do this, but it can almost be copy and paste, right? And, but you would edit it. But I mean, that can really be lower. It's high value work that can be done at a lower energy time, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's why I'm kind of glad I blindsided you, because I didn't want you to agree with me on everything. um, but that makes total sense, and I agree with that, and I see where you're coming from. And then the final step is to actually, and this is the part that most solopreneurs miss, is they think about it like, oh, yeah, those are my optimal times to work. I'm going to map it, but then they don't actually do it. So then you need to structure your operations around these natural rhythms. If you have recurring meetings, calls with clients, check-ins with contractors you're working with, fit those outside of your peak windows. Those are not high energy tasks, even though they're meetings. And then at the same time, batch similar low energy tasks together so they don't bleed into your high value time. And then here comes the scary part that people think they're going to get fired for or whatever. You have to tell your clients and the contractors that you work with when you're available and when you're not. And this is not a boundary, or sorry, this is a boundary. It's not an inconvenience. So you need to build your daily template and then default to it. And then that way you won't have to redecide every morning what's important to you that day. Everything will just kind of fall into these high energy categories. And obviously, some days will be different. You'll get curveballs, but you'll have like a baseline and the structure to start working closer to a life first business.
Can I throw a little tactic into that?
Please.
Like with tools like Calendly, you can create certain meeting types and set the times of day that you're actually, it's allowed to book you for. So you could have one for high energy meetings and one for maybe lower energy meetings, and have the time blocking be different for those. And, if it's something you want to have your brain ready, you send the high energy meeting one. It doesn't have to say that. You just say meeting with Joe or meeting with Carly. And then the other one would be if it's just something stupid that you need to deal with and you don't really want to waste your good time on, send the other one, and they'll see a whole different time of day or times of day that they can book you. So it's just a good way to kind of enforce that, in advance.
I love that. I actually didn't even know that. So that's super helpful. But Joe, that's basically it. I guess the challenge I would have for our listeners right now is start that week of auditing, start that week of observing, and see where you can be restructuring your business to really start putting those life first steps in motion. And that's all I got for this episode.
Start mine next week because it's
perfect.
Late in the week now. So very good.
Touche. Well, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, leave that 5-star review. It helps us spread nuggets of information like this to other solopreneurs looking to create a life first business. Share this episode with another solopreneur you know, and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. And we'll see you next time on The Aspiring Solopreneur.